Hello, I am Joel McLeod.
I'm Roland Tanner.
And welcome back to the 905er. It's been a whirlwind of a week here in the region and the province, and it turns out the country at large. But we are getting into some politicking on this episode, aren't we, Roland? We are
for a change.
Yes, for a bit of a change of pace here. But we are today. Today we're recording on Wednesday, March 24th. The Ontario budget came down, and it was announced that earlier this week it was announced that the federal budget, the Liberal budget, will be presented on April 2nd, which has of course sparked the talk of when are we going to have a federal election. As I'm sure I don't need to remind our listeners, there is a minority government currently sitting in Ottawa, and they can be toppled presumably at any moment. Tick tock, ooh. Well, I mean that's how it's presented in the media, right? Like every time, is this going to topple the government? Is the House going to lose confidence on this? And such and such. But yeah. That's what sparked what caught my eye today in the Toronto Star was a column by Susan Delacourt titled "The GTA will be a crucial battleground in the coming election. Can the Liberals hang on?" Which I'm not going to read it verbatim, but the general gist of it is yet again in a federal election, the 905 region is going to be a battleground area for the governance of the nation. She goes on to talk about how COVID has driven people out of Toronto into the 905 and the GTA, and presumably they have taken their liberal and socialist sensibilities with them and settled in the region. And they will therefore change the dynamic of the landscape. The Conservatives are hoping to retake much of the region because they have a leader, Aaron O'Toole, who is from the 905, and therefore that's going to win them some points in the region. The reason why I brought this column up is because this goes kind of to the heart of why we started this podcast, is that nobody pays attention to this region except for an election. And when they do, it's often on stuff like this, just, the 905 is going to win over, going to be the heart and soul of the battleground center in the election, yet nobody can talk about an issue that is near and dear to us in the 905. Nobody could say what, if anything, when we go to the ballot box, is an issue we're going to focus on, that we're going to be asking our candidates to say, well, where do you stand on this particular issue?
It's almost like election time. The 905 comes into existence again for the media. Because we know from the last few elections, provincially and federally, that the 905 has a huge influence. The reason we have a Liberal government right now is because of the 905. The reason we have a PCPO government in Queen's Park is substantially down to the 905. So we have huge influence. There never seems to be the next question, which is, like you say, what is important to this region? But it's a difficult region to take for granted because it's so increasingly so diverse. It's not the monolithic kind of white suburban middle class place that it once was.
I'm just going back to this column, and that what you just said there is kind of how it's being framed, right? It's it's talk that we're kind of this suburban middle class waspish community that we all commute into Toronto, and that's not the case anymore. We're very much diverse. Brampton, Mississauga, easily anybody would know, highly diverse, highly. A lot of minorities live in those regions, and I would argue even out into here in Halton, definitely in Hamilton. Definitely up around Vaughan, Markham, and Richmond Hill, large numbers of affluent, well-to-do minorities who are really making this country. But again, that means that the view that the media presents of the 905 is so outdated. We're far more dynamic than what they take as granted, or what they describe us as.
Yeah, I think that if you could put it into sort of two words, it would be like hockey mom city. You know, that's 3 words, but anyway, that's kind of how they view us, and it's so wrong. And it ties into a story that's going on at the moment with Peel. Mr. Oosterhoff tweeted a wonderful tweet yesterday. I know we keep on going on about him, but he's just, he tees it up and we have to hit it. What can I say? He tweeted very proudly about how the Niagara region is streets ahead of other regions in vaccine rollout and blah, blah, blah. It's like, that's not actually something to be proud of, because Niagara isn't, by no one's calculations, is a region that's particularly hard hit by COVID. Why would you be proud that you're in effect taking vaccine away from Peel that really needs it, that has led the nation in it's basically now in a third wave. There's no third wave on the way. The third wave is there if you live in Peel. They're talking about closing schools.
Amazon got shut down.
Yeah. I mean, and there seems to be, and I admit some of this myself, a profound ignorance among many people of kind of what it's like, almost like what's the phrase, the two solitudes or whatever. There used to be sort of Quebec and Ontario,
right.
And now it's I kind of feel like it's Peel and the rest of Ontario, and maybe Peel and Markham and York. That there's a difficulty in communicating between the kind of powers that be and the communities in this region. There just seems to be a divide that means that something like the obvious need to prioritize Peel in the vaccine rollout has just gone completely by the by, and far from being prioritized, they've been excluded from the AstraZeneca trial. You have to point somewhat at, I mean, Peel has a bunch of MPPs that I was just looking at, and I couldn't name them to you, to be honest. I think they're nearly all first-time MPPs, and I don't think there's a single minister among them, and they're mostly notable by their lack of profile. Now, that's a real problem, and actually something, if there is a federal election, the people of Peel should be thinking about, that a lot of what an MPP does, or an MP does, is kind of through the back channels. It's representing their region through back channels to their own party and their own leader, to make sure that it's given the attention it deserves. It feels very much like, those 10 or so MPPs are really dropping the ball on all that, because Peel is getting screwed, to be honest. I say that someone lives in Halton. It was they really are just not being properly addressed, and that's the kind of thing that I feel is going on with these comments about, we expect the 905 just to be the 905 and to kind of line up and march into voting booths and act like a kind of monolithic thing, when it's not remotely monolithic. And quite the opposite, that there are differing needs in the different regions and cities that make up the region.
Well, I mean, we're thinking a major issue that is always popping up here is development. I know people say, well, it's a provincial issue, and that's true. A lot of it comes down to the planning tribunals and the municipal affairs ministry and whatnot, and that's true. However, the federal government for a while was giving back money through the gas tax to cities for transit usage. How is that coming along? Everybody thinks it's going to Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, but a big chunk of transit is in the 905. We're very much underserved, I think, in terms of a good, very well functioning, competent transit system in the region. The second part of that is something that we've been wanting to talk about, and we haven't had a chance to nail down an episode. But the CN Rail Hub in Milton, that is a federal issue. It's been approved by the federal government to go forward. Now, it is highly contested and is highly debatable amongst the people of Milton as well. Let's face it, the current seat is held by a Liberal MP, Adam Van Couverden. He's come out on the record saying he's opposed to it, yet his party's pushing forward to it. How is that going to impact? That's a huge issue, not just for Milton, but for Canada as a whole. We're talking a transportation hub that is vitally needed somewhere. I'm not necessarily going to say Milton or wherever, but it's needed just to get our goods to market. We need these, this massive infrastructure building to be put in place to get our goods to market, especially if we want a COVID-19 recovery that's robust, that is effective, and starts lifting us out of the quagmire that we're currently in. It's got to go somewhere in the 905. We can't just say, let's put it off to down the highway to London or to Windsor or whatever. It's got to be here in the 905 because, again, we are so influential, we're so important, and we're so powerful to the chances of governance and to the economy of this country. We need stuff like this, like a transportation hub. We need infrastructure like Hamilton Harbor or Toronto Harbor that are federally maintained and controlled. We need this stuff to be functional so that we can start building again and manufacturing again and getting this stuff to market. And it's just, I kind of come back to like the media is like, we keep seeing this like, time and time again, every election. Oh, the 905, it's so crucial. Look at all the 905 votes, And to say that, Aaron O'Toole has a good shot at it because he's from here. Well, is he? Because his party just said that climate change isn't real. Yet we have, we have locally, Highway 413, which we've talked about on this podcast, that a good many people are opposed to it, not on any economic reasons, just for the fact that they say it's cutting into the greenbelt. They're looking at it from an environmental lens. And to say, your party just said that climate change, we shouldn't consider it being real, or we shouldn't consider it a factor in our decision. You're telling me that doesn't matter to these people?
Yeah, and I think maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, it would have been a very different perception. And it's still kind of perceived as the 905 is kind of perceived as a region that's whatever cohesion it has is kind of brought together by highways. But that it seems very much with the 413 story that is changing. And COVID has perhaps accelerated this with everybody working from home. The priorities of the region are not just like, I want to be able to get in my car and drive fast on a highway, but protecting the greenbelt, protecting the environment. And, I think the Liberals will be happy to see the Conservatives every day of the week go over the previous election again, make the same mistakes, and try and win votes in Alberta that they've already got. It's the dumbest political mistake you can ever make, is try to keep happy the people who are already happy.
Well, it's like, let's be honest, the Liberals are not going to win any seats in Alberta or Saskatchewan. If they do, I will be pleasantly shocked, because I'm just like, wow, didn't see that happening. But the more you think, the more you step back and you look at the landscape of the country, out east, I'm gonna call it predominantly liberal. I don't see Aaron O'Toole winning over too many people. I mean, I see a couple seats turn Tory, but for the most part, it'll remain as is. In Quebec, again, predominantly liberal. The Bloc Québécois there might be some battlegrounds in there, but it'll be divided between the Liberals and the Bloc. Here in Ontario, rural Ontario will go to the Tories, as it normally does. You'll see Ottawa between the Liberals and the NDP. Same as up north, Liberals and the NDP for the most part. The battleground, you might see the Liberals will probably maintain Toronto as they normally do. The battleground will be here in the 905. I mean, out west, it's pretty much foregone. Like, the west will go blue as it normally does. Vancouver, the BC will be a mixture of blue in the rural parts, but you'll see in Vancouver a mixture of NDP and Liberal as well. But the coin toss will be the 905.
Yeah, I mean, traditionally it was Quebec that would win and lose elections, but because the Conservatives aren't really players in Quebec, they're always going to be struggling. So it's like, which ridings in the country are genuinely able to flip between the Liberals and the Conservatives? Tends to be, it is. It's pretty much the 905. So, and if they're coming I mean, unless we should go through and address the other parties too. But if you're talking about the Conservatives, yeah, certainly it's not good enough to have to say, well, hey, I'm an MPP, I'm from the 905. Give me a break, please. That is so not impressive to anybody. And if you're coming out with policies that are out of step with the way the 905 region is increasingly looking at the world, which is more progressive, more transit friendly, more less traditionally conservative way of looking at things, then they're going to be facing an uphill battle. Now, I mean, strange things happen in elections. I mean, strange things happen in Canadian elections. I learned a long time ago. I remember in the UK, they always said, the biggest swing you'll ever get between one party and the other is about 1 to 2%. And I came over here and, we immediately had we didn't immediately have, but we had an election where, huge swings with the Liberals were suddenly started in second place and ended up almost in fourth, or actually in fourth, I think. Much bigger, is a much more volatile political landscape in many ways, and people have no loyalty to a particular party and willing to just jump ship en masse to another one. But the list you just went through is also absolutely true. It's like, where are the areas in Canada where there is a significant shift that can happen? And there are very few in number, and 905 is probably by far the biggest one.
Well, I would also argue the 905, all three parties could be in contention in this region. I know in where we live in Burlington, it's traditionally small c conservative mindset, and we've seen in the last couple elections, both federal and provincial, just it's slingshot between conservative and liberal, and even NDP loyalties in some cases. So I mean, you look at the history of this region; it is up for battle, and the people are opinionated. They know what they want.
And I think it's not good enough anymore to say the 905 is a diverse, multicultural region, and then leave it at that. The political parties and the journalists, whether from the Star or the the guys trying to be journalists at the 905, need to actually start. I mean, we spoke to Dr. Bra a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago, and that was a story about how the overwhelmingly South Asian community in parts of Peel and York that has a fantastic and strong media kind of voice in its own community, but is completely ignored and completely cut off from the kind of wider world. And we kind of need to break down those barriers, I think, to properly learn about what these cities' priorities are, and I don't think neither the media nor the kind of the main political parties are really managing to do that at present, and I think that's why we're seeing such foolish mistakes. Turning slightly in a different direction, the other question we should be asking is, who wants an election right now?
Good question.
Who does it which party wants this election to happen, or do they just feel obligated after 2 years to have one? And who amongst the population, having gone through 2020 and, well, what's going to end up being 2020 to 21-ish, wants to go through, certainly if they rerun the previous election, which was just mind-numbingly bloody awful. And just the worst election I've ever seen in my life in terms of the level of debate and the things that kind of dominated the news cycle. There's a temptation to feel that whoever causes the election is going to be the one who's going to get punished because nobody wants this damn thing to happen. And there's really no particularly good reason to do it right now.
Well, I mean, I guess that kind of brings on to the second story I was kind of looking at. As I said at the beginning, today's March 24th, Wednesday, March 24th, the Ontario PC Tory government tabled their budget for the provincial legislature. Now, it's predominantly going to get passed. I mean, they have a majority in the legislature. It's going to get passed, maybe a few tweaks here and there, but as it stands, it's going to get passed. What caught me was the Tories have essentially just given up on trying to balance the books. I mean, if you try and remember the before times, before COVID, the PCs were all about, we're going to balance the books and, we're going to fix that blasted liberal waste and spending and all that stuff that Doug Ford had promised. Stand up for the little guy and stand up for the taxpayer and all that stuff. And we're going to balance the book and get Ontario's finances in order. Well, they've thrown that plan out the window, and it's not happening for 10 years. So they're saying, according to the CBC, who's reviewed it, they say that it'll take at least till 2029 to balance the books, is what the current government's predicting. We are in deficit until then. Most of that is because of COVID-19, understandably. That's what they're blaming it on. I tend to agree with them. I think it's true. I agree with them. COVID-19 decimated the economy. We are stuck with we're stuck with deficits for the foreseeable future, like it or not. That's the reality. And what I find interesting, though, is I don't see too many people like really bashing that. Like nobody's saying, "Oh my God, you've thrown that promise out the window." Which, I mean, my political hat looks and says this is given a lot of coverage. A lot of coverage to Justin Trudeau in Ottawa to say, I'm throwing my promise out the window as well. We're not balancing the books until, 2035 or whatever. I don't know, whatever he'll come up with. He's going to table their budget on April 2nd. I wouldn't be surprised if he says, nope, our deficit's going to be even longer because of CERB and CRB and all that stuff, the wage subsidy and all those programs that we brought in. Yep, that's cost us, we're going to be deficit spending for the next foreseeable future. And I don't know if then how do you run on that? How do you topple the government and say, no, we're gonna do that? But presumably if you're Aaron O'Toole and you come in and you say, no, we're going to topple the government on that notion that we need to get budget, we need to get balanced budgets and all this stuff in order. So we're going to topple the government, which they may do. I don't know. But how do you then campaign here in the 905 particularly, or in Ontario, when the Ontario government's saying, yeah, pretty much the same thing. We're broke. We're going for broke on this. Like, how are you going to have Doug Ford stand up with you on the campaign trail and say, yeah, vote for Aaron O'Toole, vote for Pierre Poilievre or whoever, because we need a conservative government in Ottawa, when, you basically have these two opposing mindsets. I don't see how it's going to happen.
I mean, I guess you can argue about the relative size of your deficit, but yeah, it doesn't. Everybody's a deficit spender now. A phrase I think I used at some point back in the summer, something like that, is like, everybody's a socialist during a crisis, because you have to spend because you're in a crisis. The Europe spent decades paying off the debt from the Second World War. No one said, well, that's, we shouldn't have been spending on that war to defeat fascism. It was money well spent.
Do we really need all those bombs?
Yeah. The big question, which again, I mean, I'm not saying anything which isn't particularly obvious, and that hasn't really just been said about 25 minutes ago by Marcin Rejkoen, which is, if I honestly don't think this is my any kind of liberal bias speaking, but I can point very clearly to what the federal government spends its money on. I can point to CERB. I can point to bailouts. I can point to money that we've all been getting that kind of saved us. Can you point to what the Ontario government's money was spent on?
Honestly, no. I mean, I went through what this deficit, or what the budget is going to deficit over. And there are some good things in it that I'm happy that the Conservative government is, the PC government is spending money on. One is support for small businesses. They're giving more grants and whatnot for tourism-stricken, the businesses that are in the tourism industry. Great. They need the help. all that stuff. I agree that all that stuff is good. I think that's what they should have been doing back at this time last year. But better late than never, I suppose. What I find interesting though is they are not repeating any of the pandemic money for schools, which is interesting. They are not. They're supposedly going to up the long-term, not long-term care. The public health units and hospitals to increase care there, which great. We'll see how that goes. And then the one thing that they didn't talk about was Highway 413, which we mentioned earlier. They just didn't talk about it. We don't know if money's being tabled for it or not, but they just kind of not talk about that. Oh, and the other notion is they're going to work on long-term care with hope of adding 20,000 more beds in 4 years. And they're going to give PSWs $5,000 for a 6-month commitment, and while nurses can get a $10,000 for a 1-year commitment. So I guess that's a plus there. Better late than never. But I mean, like that's the thing is that we I don't know. Like I think the budget is what the budget is. I'm not surprised that we're in debt for that long. I'm not surprised that it's maybe they didn't want to go too far or whatnot. It's just if you're going that much into debt, I'm like, why stop? Like what is it that you're going to stop at? Why would you look at it and say, oh, okay, this is where I draw the line? Because if you're going to say basically no, for 10 years we're not going to balance the books, then why are you picking and choosing where you spend money? Like why aren't you dumping a ton of money into education to make schools absolutely as safe as possible?
And to an extent that if we think back to the Harper era and the those benighted Canada's Economic Action Plan posters that went up everywhere. But I mean, to be fair to them, Harper actually adopted at gunpoint the then Liberal Party's policy of going into deficit and going and spending like a divorced dad on the weekend. And that was the right thing to do at that time in the wake of 2008 to spend a whole load of money on shovel-ready projects, on building infrastructure that we're now getting the benefit of kind of getting people to work on government-funded projects to build the infrastructure for getting out of the crisis we were in. Well, employing people, rebuilding the schools in Ontario to a higher standard. There's so many things that this province could be doing. The only big scheme they've come up with is the 413. Which so yeah, I mean, where's the big ideas in this government? I mean, and even if there were, you get governments that you may not agree with, you may not like, but you cannot deny they have a central theme to them. I think Stephen Harper's government had that.
So when I got out of this budget, looking at it from the top, like the top or high level, it's a budget that is trying just to keep us afloat, which makes me say, if you admit that we're not out of the water with COVID-19, then where's the money putting into education, keeping our schools safer? Are we just in a mad rush to get all the vaccines in as quickly as we can, and we're just going to stumble over each other till we get that done? Okay, fine. That's the plan. That's the plan. But I agree. I mean, I don't. Maybe it's too early to think about this budget in that terms of let's start thinking post-COVID. But something that we've talked about on this podcast is what's life going to look like after COVID in terms of like our physical cities development. Where's the encouragement for? I'm thinking about, or off the top of my head, better Wi-Fi and internet access. I mean, that's the one thing that we all have dealt with because of COVID. We're all working from home. And how many of us have spotty internet? And nobody knows this, but we're going to go in a bit behind the scenes on this comment here. But Roland and I have talked about this when the tape's not running, how crappy the internet is. We live in Burlington. It is an urban city. We do not live out in the country. We live in a highly urbanized neighborhoods. And every now and again, our internet just cuts out because of bad internet usage. And I'm thinking, how is it in the 21st century? This is a regular thing. You know, where's the pressure to build up actual internet and Wi-Fi connectivity in our urban centers in the 905? You know, if we want to compete against the Californias and the Texas and the New York States and the Frances and Germanys and the Norways of the world and the Australias and the Japans and eventually the Indias, we need connectivity. We need to be able to plug in and just go. And I don't like it's these ideas that I'm not seeing in this budget is, okay, if we're going to come out of COVID, if we're trying to resuscitate ourselves, giving grants to small businesses is great, good, wonderful, do it. I agree with it. But we need more. Like, where's the vision of we're going to rebuild into a better society? More infrastructure that is livable in terms of green space, in terms of getting cities to rethink how they rebuild, how they're going to build themselves. Two, the social structures, the social networks in place to catch people as, you know, we're not out of the woods with COVID. Let's make sure that we're safe, that we're going to keep people safe. If they have to stay home, the paid sick days that everybody's been asking about, that they canceled from day one of them coming to office. That's a huge thing. Like, we need to start rethinking this stuff. And I don't really see that in this budget. I see a little bit of timidness, and we don't want to go in deficit, but we have to. What I do see is a budget that's going to provide a lot of cover for Justin Trudeau to pretty much say, we're writing off a lot of promises here, people.
I just don't see where with the federal election this year, I just don't see a demand for a change of government. I don't see a change election on the horizon.
No.
I mean, frankly, the Liberals did everything in their power to lose the last election against a leader who was hopeless, the Conservative leader being hopeless. Mm-hmm. It was a truly horrible election, and they still managed to win handily. I mean, sure, it's a minority, but well, I mean, I think we have to, you know, the other thing we should talk about is the inability of the NDP to make any headway whatsoever in this minority government, to raise the profile of their leader, or
the fact that every time
to really make any impact.
Well, the fact that anytime Jagmeet Singh steps up to the microphone, he talks about provincial issues. It makes me wonder, like, did you want to run here in Ontario provincially? Did you want Andrea Horwath's job, and she wasn't going to give it to you? Because every time he steps up to the microphone, he wants to talk about, we're going to give education funding. Well, that's great, but are you going to have all 10 provinces sit down with you and come up with another education accord, an education accord or something similar to the Health Act? That's a big deal, and you're going to have 10 different governments stepping out. Like, do you not understand the makeup of this country's political systems and political flavor? Like, it boggles my mind. I've said it before. I don't think the NDP will ever form government as long as I live. I don't see them having it in them.
I don't know. I mean, I think given the right leader, anybody can win. I think Jagmeet Singh has failed to make much of the impact that I think the party hoped he would make. You know, he superficially looked like a kind of a good candidate, but I'm constantly surprised by the lack of impression that he has made. And like you say, it's kind of, it just, you know, when you go on about things that aren't even federal responsibility, I mean, fine, you can say, well, most voters don't care. They just want to hear someone sort of shouting on their behalf. But I think people are actually smarter than that. You know, it just insults people's intelligence a little bit to say, no, that's not a federal issue.
If you wanted it, you should have stayed at Queen's Park and advocated for that stuff. He used to be a provincial MPP here in Ontario. He's from the 905. He was from Brampton. He held one of the Brampton seats, and to sit there and say, if you wanted that job, great. You probably could have made a good run to be premier of Ontario. That would have been a very laudable goal and a feather in his cap, all that. But instead, he's gone on to the federal level, and I sit there and scratch my head a little and say, you're not talking about stuff that I care about at that level. You're trying to make a name. I know he's trying to make a name for himself. He's trying to differentiate himself, but you don't come across. You come across as somebody who's not informed of basic Canadian civics, and that tells.
Either not informed or has decided to ignore them on the belief that we're all so stupid that we don't know the difference. I mean, there's one element of this that's not Jagmeet Singh's fault at all, and I feel it's a horrible, horrible thing. And that is the fact that because he's a Sikh, he's not going to make any headway in Quebec.
That's right.
That's wrong. That's appalling. It's a disgrace. But from the NDP's point of view, their route to power is through Quebec, sort of pulling a Jack Layton 2.0, so to speak. Without that, they're not going to get it in Alberta. They're not going to get it in the Midwest. Well, I mean, I guess there is a history in the Midwest, but not in those parts of the.
They can secure some seats in Ontario and some in BC, but I don't really see them expanding much beyond their whatever the 22 seats I think they have now. They're not going to expand much beyond that. Maybe one or two, but for the most part, it's going to come down between Liberal and Conservative. And you're right. If the Conservatives and the NDP team up to bring down this government come April, I think the Canadian people are not going to forgive them. I don't. You'll always hear like there'll be the people who side and say, oh, Trudeau's corrupt and he's the wrong choice. We need to get rid of him. I don't think there's that many people out there. I think there are too many people who are going to remember. You know what? When COVID hit, they came through with money. And I think that's just what it comes down to.
Safe pair of hands thing, isn't it? I mean, it's like I'm not the world's biggest fan of Justin Trudeau. I say that as someone who has knocked on doors for that party. I find him so moderate and so reluctant to really be brave in policies that I find it frustrating. But then again, he's the Prime Minister, not me. He's probably a lot smarter than me when it comes to these decisions, and I would probably have got my ass kicked out of office a long time ago because I would have done something crazy like
reform our electoral system
or something. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, number one, day one, I would have done that, and then immediately got booted out 2 weeks later. But yeah, exactly. So it's a bit rich coming from me. I will probably always wish that people were a little bit bolder. However, is he not a broadly safe pair of hands to be, or is the Liberal Party broadly, are they so incompetent that we worry for our future? Are they so awful, arrogant, or corrupt that we're worrying about what's happening next week? I don't see it. You've got to have that. You've either got to have that build up of as the Ontario Liberals had, where they'd just been around for so damn long that everybody was sick of the sight of them, and there was really no coming back from that. Or you've got to have something tangible you can point to that was just a monumental screw up. And it's like, well, an awful lot of people during this COVID experience have had a sort of intimate relationship with government finance in a way that they've never had before, and it's been broadly to their benefit. So I think the opposition would be crazy to call an election right now. I think you want to get as far away from COVID as possible if I were them. I wonder if it won't be the Liberals who try to maneuver the opposition into bringing down the government kind of almost against their will.
That's a very true possibility. I just don't see it happening. Come April 2nd, there'll be some moaning and complaining, but in terms of an actual anything that people can latch on to say, oh, this is one step too far, Justin, we got to remove you from office. I doubt that it's going to be there. Maybe in some people's minds, but not the broad Canadian mindset. I mean, that's now. I'll leave the door open. Justin Trudeau might be like riding high, like, oh, I can do all this stuff now, and comes down with this monster of a budget that you just say, okay, dude, you let it go to your head. Totally, it could totally happen. I just not sure it's going to happen, but I don't know. We'll see what happens. But again, I think it'll all bring it back full circle. If an election does happen, it's all going to be about here in the 905.
Absolutely, yeah. And we'll be on the record, so all those dumb things I've just said, you'll be our audience will be able to come back and hold me to account for. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I'm going to leave it at that on that note because we're coming up on our mark here. So I'm going to say goodbye for now, and we'll see you next week.
Bye. We just have time today to add in a quick thank you to our patrons. Starting off with our 905er consultants, Mike Quackenbush and International Man of Mystery, Hales Borshagin, Shannon Gillies, Gail Laws, Lynn Crosby, Eric, Sean Vandercleese, and Kyle Selms. Thank you, all of you, for your support. It means a huge amount to us.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.
Looking to make the most out of this life and optimize your personal wellness? Then check out the Natural Man Podcast. Join me, host Mike C., as we explore all areas of human wellness, physical, mental, and emotional. Learn strategies to optimize your own well-being and be in the driver's seat of your own health. Remember, your doctor works for you. Learn biohacks, neurohacks, ways to improve sleep, and ways to optimize your body and your mind. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, the Fountain app, and at naturalmanpodcast.com.